Good morning. It is so good to see you. If we haven't met yet, my name is Kyle, and I've been gone for the last month, so I'm just stalling as long as I can just to take this moment in to see your beautiful faces, to see some faces I haven't met yet. But over the last month, I've just had a phenomenal time. I got to take my family to Mexico. I took my 10-year-old on his first father-son camping trip. That's kind of a lie. It was a father-son glamping trip, but I don't want to say camping because there's lots of beards and tough dudes around here, and I feel like I lose credibility because I'm better with an Excel spreadsheet than with an axe. But we went glamping and whitewater rafting. That was cool, little small rapids, and the family reunion. But also, as I was gone, there was this time of just asking God, what do you have next? God, what is the future, not just of my life, my family, but for Life Community Church? And I started asking this question, what is it gonna look like? And it's not just what is the church gonna look like, but what is God gonna do to get us there? And who are you gonna be on the other side? When you look in the mirror, or maybe you look in the mirror of your heart a year from now, who are you gonna become? How will you be transformed? How will you be set free? How will you be able to live a life full of passion and faith, serving others and living in the joy that God has for you? What is it gonna look like on the other side? So as I'm asking these questions and pondering the future, I remember what Stephen Covey said in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He says this, he says, begin with the end in mind. So I started thinking about it. What would the end look like? And don't get me wrong, the idea of the end of a church sounds so depressing to me. But I just said at the end, I just wonder if Life Community Church ceased to exist, would our community even care? Would they say, oh, we don't know? Or would they say, oh, no. I've never been there, but I have a family member who went there, and they used to be the biggest jerk in the world, and now there's something different about them. And would they say, oh my gosh, I remember the first time I went there. I wasn't a church person, I wasn't a Jesus follower, but I went in and I felt loved and connected and cared for, and they gave me a space where I could discover the love of God. And would they say, oh my gosh, how are people who are food insecure, how are they gonna be fed? And kids who are struggling, where are they gonna find a place to be loved and known, one at a time? What would they say at the end? Stephen Covey talks about this for our life, and I thought about my life, and at the end of my life, what will folks say? I thought about taking my 10-year-old camping, and I hope that at the end he looks at me and says, my dad loved this church. He loved being a pastor, but he loved me, his son, even more. And even more than he loved me, his son, my dad loved Jesus, and Jesus transformed him and taught him how to love the way only God could love. You begin with the end in mind. And as morbid as it sounds, Covey goes on and says, hey, when you think about your funeral, what will people say at your funeral? Or maybe it's this, it's on your deathbed when you're gathering with folks, who do you want to be there and what do you want them to say? I had this conversation with my family at our family reunion this past week. I did a 36-hour trip to Orange County, and I was having this conversation with them. This is awesome. I never get to think about the future this way, which is what they said to me in front. And then afterwards, they said, guys, don't talk to Kyle. Everything's way too deep, way too soon. All of a sudden, he's asking you your deepest, darkest fears and what's going on, and we're just here to smile and nod and all this. But they said, I'd love this opportunity to think about this future. So this morning, while it may seem like a change of pace, I want you to think about the end. What do you want folks to say? Who do you want to be there? And what do you want your legacy to be? And for the next 30 minutes, I want you to lean in because we're gonna look at a story of someone who actually has done it. He's actually coming to the end. It's Moses. Moses' story we've been looking at lately. It starts with him born as someone who's bicultural and feels out of place. He goes on to become a murderer and a fugitive from the law. And then at the ripe young age of 80, God gets a hold of his life. And God says, hey, I know you're 80, but I got this big dream for you. And Moses is like, yeah, that's not gonna happen. And then he does it. He becomes the embodiment of God's salvation, leading the people from slavery in Egypt to freedom in this promised land, walks them through 40 years of this wilderness where they become transformed as a people. And now they're at the very end of it. And it's the end of his tenure. It's the very end. He's going to retire. He's going to be done. And all of a sudden at the end, we get this picture of the end. And I hope that what we learn from the end of Moses' life helps you think better about the end of your life and your legacy. So with the fear of being morbid, let's think about the end together. And let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 31. Deuteronomy chapter 31 is the end of Moses' journey and his tenure. The book Deuteronomy, you can find it. You go all the way to the left. It'll be Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy, the word means second law. It is essentially a long speech or series of speeches, depending on who you ask, that Moses is giving to the people to prepare them to go from the promise. They've all lived their entire lives in wilderness, and they go from wilderness to promise. From I think I can to I'm actually going to do it. And here is some of his final words towards the end. Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 1 begins like this, as we think with the end in mind. Moses went out and spoke these words to all Israel. I am now 120 years old. I am no longer able to lead you. Pause. How do you think this boy was doing at 119? Do you think at 119 he's like, I'm feeling young and spry, but all of a sudden 120 he's like, I'm too tired for this. I can't do this anymore. What happened? And what does he do? How does the end? What's the watch that they give him? What's the golden ticket? What is the end? What does his retirement ceremony look like? He's led them, and now they're on the doorstep of achieving and receiving the goal, not only of freedom from Egypt, but life in this promise that God has given them. Verse 2. I'm 120 years old, and I am no longer able to lead you. The Lord has said to me, you shall not cross the Jordan. Wait. You shall not cross the Jordan. That sounds like an AI and Michael Jordan reference for those of you who don't know Bible. But here's how it understands is there's this river Jordan that marks the end of wilderness and transition to this new permanent place. And at the end of this transition, he says, I'm not going to get there. He's essentially saying, hey, I know I've led this company, but I'm not taking it public. Hey, I know that I'm the one who built the house, but I'm not going to live in it. I know I've raised my kids, but I'm not going to get to walk them down the aisle because my time is done. If you looked at it, you think this is the most depressing end ever. If you looked at it, you're like, well, Moses, you did all these great things, and now you don't get to reap the benefit of it. You cook the meal, and you don't get to eat it. It seems like his life is a failure, right? Until you see the genius of legacy and beginning with the end in mind. The Lord your God himself will cross ahead of you. He will destroy the nations before you, and he will take possession of their land. Joshua, that name's important. We're going to talk about him. Joshua will cross ahead of you, as the Lord said, and the Lord will do to them what he did to Sihon and Og, the kings of the Amorites, who he destroyed along with their land. The Lord will deliver you. You must do what he has commanded you to do. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them. The Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you or forsake you. Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the presence of Israel, be strong and courageous, for you must go with the people into the land the Lord swore to their ancestors, and you must divide it among their inheritance. The Lord himself will go before you. He will never leave you or forsake you. Do not be discouraged. Isn't this a depressing story? He doesn't get to see the promise. He doesn't get to taste the land flowing with milk and honey. He doesn't get to see the fruit of his labors. But there's something about legacy that we see in this story that I hope you see. Moses' legacy is not defined by what he did. It's not defined by, I got him in the promised land. It's not defined, I got him out of Egypt. It's not even defined that I wrote this law. What is his legacy defined by? His legacy is defined by this young punk kid named Joshua. Let me just tell you, friends, legacy is never about what, it's about who. Let me just be straight with you, friends. At the end, no one cares about your titles, your treasures, or your trophies. When I get to the end of my life, I hope no one there is talking about the high score I got in a chess game or on an online video game. If they're talking about my accomplishments, we've messed up. I hope when they get there not saying, oh my gosh, he was a pastor, because here's the deal, having the title of a pastor doesn't matter if lives weren't changed and transformed. I don't care what your title is, if lives aren't impacted, you're missing it. No one cares about the treasure that you have. No one's gonna care about how many real estate deals I've done in my life. But the people who are there are gonna be the ones who are the most important to me. You see, I saw this 4 years ago. My 98-year-old grandma, they'd lived a rich, full, amazing life, died with all 6 of her kids surrounding her. 4 years later, we are gathered at her house with a cutout of her, 4'11", and we're literally singing the songs that we wrote about her at 80 and 90 and telling stories. We're literally reading stories, letters that she wrote when she was a young, broke church planner, when she lived in an 800 square foot apartment with 5 kids, and she worked as a dental hygienist because her husband made a bad life choice of becoming a pastor and made 0 money. And he's like, I'm supporting them by being a dental hygienist. I'm also trying to raise 5 kids. And no, on the weekends, what do you do for your personal time, your quality time? I cook soup in a big pot for all of the workers who come because we're building the church by hand. We read this letter. She says this, and I pause because it's crass, but remember, she's a 4'11" pastor's wife. She says this. She said, the first half of my life, I was a poor church mouse. The second half of my life, I was a rich wench. But she didn't use the word wench. She used a word that I can't say because I want to keep my job. What are you talking about? First half of my life, I lived in poverty. The second half of my life, I lived in a 3,000 square foot home in South Orange County, in one of the most prestigious places you could ever live. Nixon was gonna build the Western White House right next to me. Yeah, then he got in trouble. So I'm like, oh, what happened to Nixon? Yeah, let's Google it. She said, I'd go and trade every single moment I had in my mansion for those moments with my kids there, being a part of investing in the community. They were planting a church. They moved from Nebraska to plant a church in the town with the highest murder rate in the country. And she sent her oldest daughter off to the store to buy groceries. I'm like, huh? By any other metric, it's crazy. But this is the same woman who had house guests 200 nights a year through her 80s. Why? Because the legacy that she lived was about who and not what. We love the house. We love her fashion. We told stories about her trips, but every single one of us talked about the way she made us feel. Her legacy was 6 kids, 18 grandkids, and after a dozen, you stop counting grandkids, great grandkids. This is what legacy looks like. So friend, let me ask you, who is it that you want there your last day? What do you want them to say about you? And let me just tell you, friends, I just want to warn you. No one cares about your titles, your treasures, or your trophies. But your legacy, what we see in Moses, is not that he got into the promised land, but he took 40 years to invest in this young kid named Joshua. And 40 years later, he was finally able to do it. 40 years later, he says, Joshua, I trust you a little bit, and God, I trust you a lot, and I pass my legacy to you. It's not in the text, but I'm pretty sure after he did that, when Joshua said, don't mess it up. When you're 120, you can say whatever you want. What will your legacy be? It won't be what, it will be who. And so as we sit with that, we begin with the end in mind. I just want to sit and let that moment sink in with you for a second. Now, some of you say, okay, Kyle, okay, I get it. Yeah, but I'm not Moses. Good, we're all agree. Some are like, I'm not gonna be able to lead like that. I'm not gonna be able to teach like that. I'm not gonna write all that. Yeah, some of you say, I can't do it, and I get that. You say, I can't do it. You don't know what I've done. You don't know who I am. I don't know anything. Yeah. But let's just be clear about Moses' story. Moses was a murderer and a fugitive. He lived literally in the wilderness, hanging out with animals until he was 80 years old. At 80 years old, God did a miracle, did a burning bush to come and speak to him at the age of 80. And what did God do? And what did Moses do when he saw a miracle? He said no to God and refused his calling. So let me just say this. If you haven't killed anyone, if you're under the age of 80 and you have not said no to a burning bush yet, you're in a better position than Moses. This is the good news. The good news is not be like Moses. The good news is this. The good news is that God uses imperfect people to complete and fulfill his perfect plan. The good news is this. If God came down in his glory and his perfection, it's amazing. He did that in the person and work of Jesus. It was unbelievable seeing God up close and personal. And then what do? He's like, I'm gonna take these other riffraff, these 12 guys, actually 11 of them now, because one of them voted himself off the island. And now there's these 11 imperfect people. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use them to transform the world. And my legacy will not be in the books that I've written, but in these 11 folks who will then go and start a revolution that 2,000 years later, there'll be over 2 billion people around the world who lift up and glorify the name of Jesus Christ. Why? Because he used imperfect people like you and like me to fulfill his perfect plan. So if you are good enough, you're disqualified. But it's the things that you have done wrong that give the most glory to Jesus. The things that glorify Jesus are not how smart I am. It's the fact that I have ADD and no filter and I haven't gotten myself fired yet. That's testimony to Jesus. So if you're new in the last month, that joke doesn't mean anything to you. The good news is that God takes imperfect people to fulfill his perfect plans. If I can just be honest with you, friends, one of the things that God's been teaching me is to be clearer. So let me just be clearer with you. If you look at this church, you look at these folks, the folks who are the most happy in our church are the ones who are intentionally investing in others. There's no one happier than our youth and kids volunteers. There's no one happier. I'll tell you, there's these folks, they get together every week to count money. There's nothing I'd rather do than sit around and count money that's not mine. Counting money that's mine, awesome. But counting money that belongs to God, I'm like, yeah, whatever. And what do? They just love it. Why? Because they know that what they do has a purpose and they get to do it with people they like. Let me just tell you, if your life is bored, or you are bored in your life, the number one way to fix that is not getting a new hobby, it's getting a new purpose. Because no one who's in our church who's actively serving, who's giving out food on Friday nights, none of those folks are like, my life is boring and purposeless. Their biggest tension is this: I really like binging that Netflix show, but I also know there's something else good to do. Ooh, what do I do? And at the end, they say, this is so much more fun and valuable. If your life is boring and your faith is boring, it's because you are not actively loving and serving others. I told you I took my son glamping, right? This is the beginning of a rite of passage trips I'm gonna take with him. So at 10, at 12, 14, 16, when he graduates college or trade school or whatever that may be. And I talked to him, hey, this is what we're gonna do. He says, great. I said, we're gonna go to the Grand Canyon. Great. We're gonna do a trip that you pick. Great. He said, what's the purpose? The purpose is becoming an adult. He says, how do I know when I'm an adult? And I'm like, you don't. No one knows. Some say 18, some say 21, some say when you have fully developed prefrontal cortex. My answer is, how do you know when you're adult? It's when you pay for all of your own insurance and your own cell phone bill. That's just my opinion, but here we go. But in this moment, I'd never said it this way before, but again, we're glamping, so I've got nothing else to do but think of new stuff. And so I said, hey, this. I said, when you're a kid, you take care of yourself. No, I'm sorry. When you're a kid, you need someone else to take care of you. When you're a young adult, you can hopefully take care of yourself. Some of you are like, my young adult doesn't do that. I'm sorry. Okay. The young adult, you take care of yourself. But when you're an adult, you're able to take care of others. This is the same journey in your faith. If you are bored, if you are not growing, if your life is restless, find a way to invest in someone. Head right down there, volunteer at Blast, get involved in some sort of ministry here at the church. And let me just tell you, when you do that, you will find your faith and your fire come alive like no other before. I promise you this. And if you do it and it doesn't work, here's my promise. I'll take you out to lunch and I'll help you find a place that does make your heart come alive. Where you realize that, wow, this is the greatest legacy I can leave, is investing in others. One more quick story on this. I was having a conversation with someone in our church a few months ago. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm so busy at work. I got young kids, but I'm trying to figure out my place to volunteer at the church. What do you think? And I looked at him, I said, hey, you're so busy, you should not be volunteering at church right now. He's like, huh? I said, listen, in your work every day, your work is 100% about investing in and developing people. You can have a bigger impact in your career than you can have in the church right now. I said, there's great ways for you to serve in the church, but for you individually, it's there. So let me be clear, it doesn't have to be in the church, but just let me ask you this. Is your life about investing in and taking care of other people? Moses was a failure for 80 years and then spent the next 20 years investing in this young kid named Joshua, and his legacy becomes Joshua. Who is your Joshua? It may be 40 years, it may be a long time, but that's your legacy. So how does Joshua feel? You think Joshua's like, oh, this is awesome. I've been waiting my time. I've been waiting for 40 years. This is it. Do you think he's like, hey, Moses, where are you going? I've never done this without you. How do you think Joshua feels? It says in the text, but it says it politely. Tells you how Joshua feels. Listen to this. Verse 6, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for the Lord goes with you. Verse 7, be strong and courageous. Verse 8, the Lord will never be with you, or will never leave you or forsake you. Do not be afraid or discouraged. How does Joshua feel? If I come to you and say, hey, I want to tell you something, don't be afraid, my blood pressure goes up. If I've got to tell you, hey, don't worry, it's going to be fine, but if you start that conversation, you know what that person is doing is scared. And here's the thing, Joshua's gonna do it, and he's gonna do it scared. Moses, I've never done it without you. But what if the people don't listen to me? Moses, they didn't listen to you. Why would they listen to me? I'm just a young punk kid. He does it scared. So what does God say over and over and over? Do not be afraid. Quick commercial. In 2 weeks, we're starting a series on the life and ministry of Joshua, where he's going to take this story and continue it from wilderness into promise. And the number one theme of the book is do not be afraid. And God's only saying that because he knows they're afraid. Let me be clear. If I challenge you to invest in others and you're not afraid, that makes me afraid. If you don't realize your ability to mess someone up, or your shortcomings as a human being, and that doesn't make you a little afraid, that makes me afraid because you lack self-awareness. So why does he not be afraid? There's two reasons. Number one, he says, the Lord your God goes with you. The Lord your God goes with you. The Lord your God goes with you. But what else does he say? He says, who are you? He's like, well, my name's Joshua. Interesting. Coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. The word Joshua means the Lord saves. So what is his identity? My identity is the Lord saves. It's not I save. It's not Moses saves. It's not that our army saves. It's not that our law saves. His identity, every day he's reminded, every time someone calls him name, he says, the Lord saves. Over and over, he could not be reminded more that it's the Lord who saves and not him. So now we get it. In a life leaving a legacy, you will do it afraid and you won't be the one who does it. This is the good news, is that God takes imperfect people like Moses and like Joshua, like me and like you. He takes imperfect people to fulfill his perfect plan, even when it's scary. And what's the reminder? He will be with you, and he's the one who does the work. Some of you are going in to Blast this week and you're volunteering, and at day 2 or day 3, you're gonna be completely overwhelmed, either by the sun, the schedule, or someone in your small group. Sorry, that joke did not land. And what you need to know is I can't do it. Good. When you get to the end of yourself, you get to the beginning of God, because without that, you're depending on your power. And when you say, no, I'm gonna depend on the power of God, you can do more than you could ever ask, think, or imagine. But your power is limited. His is unlimited. And that's the choice you get. God will intentionally bring you to places that scare you to death so you're forced to trust him. And if you haven't been scared lately, you're playing it too safe. So what do you do when you're scared? So the worship team comes out. What do you do when you're scared? It's interesting, obviously we celebrated 4th of July. You know that because you were stayed up way too late with people putting out fireworks and hearing dogs barking all night. And so thinking about that reminded me that in October 1777, in the middle of the Revolutionary War, there were 2,000 British forces. Technically, they weren't British, they were Hessian. They were Germans who were hired by the British as mercenaries, and they're chasing this small group of revolutionary soldiers. There's 400 of them. There's 400 on 2,000, and like, what do we do? And so what they do is they retreat into a base, and get this, they retreat into this base, and they realize that the base is too big. Their 400 people cannot even support this base. They are outnumbered. They can't use their defenses. And what do? This is a part of American history they never taught me in school. They ended up relying on a French engineer for help. The patriotic folks in here, the French helped us? Yeah. They gave us more than just fries and condescending jokes. There's this French engineer who looked at him and says, okay, I get it. You are totally overwhelmed because you can't guard this whole fort. He gave him 3 things. He said, no, we're gonna shrink down the fortifications. We realize you can't guard this whole thing, so we're gonna shrink it down. The second thing what we're gonna do is we're gonna change this. We are going to build some traps and spikes so they're forced to be funneled this way. So we're gonna have these little kill spots right here. The third thing we're gonna do is we're actually gonna re-engineer some of the gates and use some of the cannons, and we're gonna use all of these different tactical things. They needed someone outside of them, smarter than them, who were not lost in the fear. They needed an expert from outside of them, do you hear me, to coach them. But as I was researching it, one of the things that came to the end, they said, no doubt, this French engineer, whose name I can't pronounce, which is why I'm not saying it, helped. But the other thing that helped was they had hope and a belief that because of the plan that they were given by someone outside, by someone smarter than them, by someone who's not overwhelmed by the fear, they had hope that they could do it. So let me just be clear. God has a plan, and it's gonna take imperfect people like you and me doing things that scare you to death, but only feeling able to do it because there's one who is smarter, who leads us and guides us. That is the good news, that wherever you go, the Lord is with you to lead you and guide you in the scary and in the unknown. And once you do that, you realize it's not about you. It allows you to live a legacy that says it's all about others. Why? Because Joshua, the Lord saves, points to this name later. Jesus, directly related, that says the Lord saves. And so as I begin with the end in mind, I just wonder, what's it gonna look like? I wanna know who and how God is gonna save folks, not only in this room, but folks in this community that we've never met yet. God's gonna save them. Some of you are trapped in hurts, habits, and hangups, and I just wanna tell you, God saves. He's gonna rescue you from that. Because that's what he does, God saves. Some are like, well, what's my purpose in life? It's not about you. That's your purpose. It's about letting God love others through you, because God saves. Some of you are going into blast this week, and I can't wait to hear the stories. I begin with the end. I can't wait to hear stories about volunteers who were scared and overwhelmed, but they realized, oh my gosh, this is my passion, this is my gift, this is my calling, and now I realize I can do things differently. I can't wait to hear stories about kids who, by the dozen, give their life to Jesus because they realize he saves me. His way is the best way. Because God saves. This is the story that God saves, and how does he do it? He uses imperfect people like you and me to fulfill his perfect plan. He has a perfect plan, and it includes you and me. As we think about God saving, think about the night before he went to the cross to save us. He looked at these 12 imperfect people, one of which who'd betrayed him, and he said, "This is my body, which is broken for you." In the same way, this is the blood of my covenant that was shed for the forgiveness of sins and shed for you. And he invites them. For some of you today, this is a reminder that God saves. This invitation to receive communion, for some of you, you've never done it, or you've never said, or you've never put your trust in Jesus. But by standing up, coming up here and receiving it, this is your testimony of you saying, I trust that God saves, and I don't know what the future holds, but I want to follow him. For some of you, you are scared by what's going on, and this is the reminder that he is with you. Because in all things, God saves. Not you, not me. Jesus is the one who saves. And with that end in mind, I don't have to be afraid anymore because he does it. Not you, not me, not us as a church. It's all about him. Always has been, always will be. And when I think about the end in mind, let's never forget it always has been, and it always has been about Jesus. Let's pray. God, we thank you for rescuing us, for transforming us, for leading us through these wildernesses of unknown change and trial. And we thank you for who we're becoming by your grace and your power. Lord, as we receive this gift, I pray that it would not just fill our mouths, but fill our hearts and our minds and our spirit. And remind us that you are always with us, even till the very end. In Jesus' name, all God's people said, amen.